and Nicola Walker plays Annika, who is Norwegian by descent. Hang on, there's someone downstairs. Hello everyone, my name is Lex and welcome back to the Tandem Collective YouTube channel, where you can find the latest bookish recommendations and cultural releases from Team Tandem. Today I am so excited to be back with you as your crime and thriller recommendations expert, your genre correspondent, and today we will be diving into one of my favourite subgenres of crime and thriller fiction, which is Nordic Noir. I've chosen a bit of a background today as a bit of a nod to the theme, but also I'm in the office and it's a bit messy. So just pretend that this is the house that I live in and the life that I lead. This is how I feel inside. This is what my house should look like. But enough of me waffling on. So what is Nordic Noir? Nordic Noir is a subgenre of crime and thriller fiction typically set within the Scandi countries. You might hear it referred to as Scandi-crime fiction, but as a fan of alliteration, Nordic Noir just kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit nicer. And if we can get the word noir into more of our vocabulary, why wouldn't we? So before you jump into Nordic Noir, there's a little content warning note that I would like to give you. There are a lot of markers of Nordic Noir that are typically a lot darker than your standard crime or thriller fiction. Markers of Nordic Noir will include like really bleak settings. It is dark, it is cold, it is icy. Like my heart. It sounds like a terrible place to hang out, but it makes for the most atmospheric stories, which at this time of year, I tend to gravitate towards. I wouldn't class myself as a mood reader, but seasonally, particularly around Christmas, October, November, and the New Year time, I do like to lean into Nordic Noir. It's my kind of nod to mood reading. It is always quite violent. I say that with a big smile on my face because this is probably one of my favorite genres to read through. That being said, it would be a miss if I didn't flag this for you. Nordic Noir is typically a lot more violent, a lot more gruesome, a lot more gory and very graphic in the descriptions of violent crime. And I know that that is something that readers want flagged. So when you're diving into a Nordic Noir book, just be aware that that is a kind of a marker for the subgenre. Something that maybe won't come as a surprise is that there are a lot of police officers, investigative police procedurals. Quite a lot of Nordic Noir titles do tend to lean into that trope of a detective battling their own demons, potentially having their own addiction problems that we see in a lot of crime thriller subgenres. But I would say definitely a marker for Nordic Noir as well. That being said, I don't think that there is a subgenre that is better for atmosphere and plot than Nordic Noir. Like those two things go hand in hand within this subgenre, which makes it so idyllic for me. So nowadays it feels like everybody knows what Nordic Noir is, but how did you come across it? That's the big question. And for most people my age, 30, it will be the Stieg Larsson effect. It was the groundbreaking success of Stieg Larsson's Millennium trilogy that drew so many people to reading Nordic Noir. And it's 100% a prime example of all of those markers that I've just run through with you. This series started out as a 3-book arc, but since Larsson's passing, I think, has been carried on by other authors writing these characters in his stead. So that being said, on the Stieg Larsson front, many people actually refer to Henning Markle as the father of Nordic Noir. So very much dependent on what kind of a generation you sit in when it comes to your reading, you might recognize Wallander as a bit more of a standout character in your Nordic Noir recollections. So with Stieg Larsson and Henning Menkel in mind, who are our other champions of Nordic Noir? I don't think you can talk about Nordic Noir champions without mentioning Norwegian author Jo Nesbø. He is the author of the Harry Hole series, and there was also a film made of The Snowman, which is available on Netflix now, starring Michael Fassbender as Harry Hole. There is also Lars Kepler. I'm really enjoying Lars Kepler books at the moment. Lars Kepler is actually two authors, a couple I believe, writing under one name. The first in the book series is The Hypnotist, I believe, and the most recently published book is called The Spider, and I've actually just listened to that on BorrowBox. I really love the narrator of the Unilina audiobooks. Again, it just lends to the vibes and the accent and the complete immersion that this genre brings. Speaking of immersion, one of my other recommendations for champions of the genre would be Ragnar Jonasson. Ragnar Jonasson has written a series called the Hidden Iceland series. And again, I listened to this in audiobook, and it is read by Amanda Redman. Amanda Redman of New Tricks fame. I'm sure she's done other stuff, but that is what I knew her for. And now I cannot picture these books and this character of Hulda, our detective, as anyone other than Amanda Redman. If there's ever a TV show or a movie adaptation of those books, if they don't cast Amanda Redman, they are wrong. There are 3 books in the series: The Darkness, The Island, and The Mist. And for me, what was really special about those books is that they take a really interesting narrative strategy with the way that they tell you Hulda's story. I don't want to tell you too much about it because it was so good to experience it the first time around reading it, but all I will say is that one gets a special recommendation from me. Other authors of note that I would definitely say deserve a mention in this list are Camilla Lackberg, Alex Dahl, Gisa Sigersdottir. Really hope that I've said that even vaguely correctly. But lastly on this list, and potentially controversially, I would place Will Dean. So Will Dean is a British writer currently living in a shed in Sweden that he has made completely, up and running with power and electricity and all kinds of things. And he is the author of the Tuva Moodysson series. I was so excited to read this one because it is set in Sweden, and Tuva was my first ever experience of a deaf protagonist. I don't want to say anything else because I want you to enjoy this series the way that I did when I first read it. I think that's the best way to experience these books. But it was so interesting to read from the perspective of a deaf investigator. I think actually Tuva is a crime reporter for a newspaper. So having that slight difference, she's not a police procedural kind of character. She's working alongside the police at times, and sometimes actually against the police to try and find her story, but very, very interesting character. And I've just heard that it's going to be adapted into a TV show, which is super interesting. Although I do think that they are setting the TV show in Scotland, which I'll be really interested to see. For me, that book is so set in Sweden. I'm sure it will work. I have complete faith in it. I know that Will Dean is really excited about it. The casting looks amazing. So I am very, very excited to see that adaptation. I'm now going to give you some recommendations that I have called a touch of Nordic Noir. So these aren't fully fledged Nordic Noir promises. These are bookish media recommendations that have a nod to the Nordic feel. So maybe you can dip your toes into the icy, icy waters with these and then come for a full old swim with Unilina and Harry Hole, because that is where the action is at. First on this nod to Nordic, I would say the Black Harbour series by Hannah Morrissey. It's very atmospheric, but never ever lets go of that breakneck pace, which for me feels very, very Nordic Noir. Like the atmosphere is up here, and that's what I want from a book like this. The other recommendation is a multi-platform recommendation. So I fell in love with Nicola Walker as Annika in the BBC adaptation of Annika Stranded. Annika Stranded, I think, was originally a BBC radio drama, but also potentially a book. In the book and in the radio drama, we follow Annika, who is a police officer on the Oslo police boat patrol. And she is consistently making references to her own Norwegian upbringing. In the BBC adaptation, not unlike the Will Dean adaptation, they have moved the story to Scotland. And Nicola Walker plays Annika, who is Norwegian by descent. Hang on, there's someone downstairs. Oh my God. Honestly, I thought I was about to have a heart attack. Well, that was far more dramatic than it needed to be. There's no one downstairs, it's the window cleaner. But that scared the shit out of me. I first fell in love with Annika when it was the BBC adaptation. It had previously been a BBC radio drama, and I think also a book as well. In the original radio drama and the book, Annika was set in Oslo, and she is consistently referencing her own Norwegian upbringing. In the BBC adaptation, they've moved the production to Scotland, so it's set in Glasgow, and Annika is head of the Marine Investigative Department. So it's her job to investigate crimes that happen on the water. It's filmed beautifully on this gorgeous, gorgeous harbour, but it definitely still has that nod to Nordic Noir because it's very chilly, it's very cold, and the main character still references her own Nordic upbringing. A definite recommendation from me. And if you have also fallen in love with Annika and you can't find season 2, don't panic like I did. It's no longer on the BBC, it has been moved to Alibi, but if you have Now TV, you can watch it there. Season 2 is brilliant. Season 1 was my favourite. Final recommendations on this quick whistle-stop tour through Nordic Noir. I've given you Wallander, I've given you Lars Kepler, I have given you Annika. I have given you Ragnar Jonassen's The Hidden Iceland series as all must-consume medias. Lastly, I would love to recommend to you The Crow Girl, which is a chunky book. Like, I think we're talking about 800 pages, by an author called Eric Axelsson. And I first read this book just last year, actually. It was a recommendation by one of my favorite book bloggers. She is Abby, she is at Crime by the Book, and she is 100% where I get most of my Nordic Noir recommendations from. The Crow Girl is very chunky, but what I will say is that its atmosphere up here, its plot up here, but it's also deep. It feels literary, it feels clever, it's psychological, whilst never missing that thrilling element. So if you are fully well versed in your Nordic Noir exploration, I would challenge you with The Crow Girl. So team, that is everything from me today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for coming to hang out and for journeying through Nordic Noir fiction with me. As always, if you have any recommendations, please hit me up in the comments below. I cannot wait to see what you're reading. See you soon, guys. Bye.